Welcome to the Word in Minutes podcast. I'm your host, Devin Glasgow, and today's topic is when everything sounds right but isn't. And I'm going to open up with scripture, and it's from a book of the Bible that I'm currently studying, and that is Deuteronomy, and we're in chapter 13, verse 3. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And let me start by asking you something. What if something looked right, sounded right, even worked, but wasn't from God? That's exactly what Deuteronomy 13 is confronting. God tells his people there will be voices that come into your life that seem convincing. They might even perform signs, produce results, or say things that feel spiritual. But here's the warning that he says. If it leads you away from God, don't follow it. That flips how most of us think because we tend to measure truth by results, right? If it's growing, it must be from God. Or if it feels good, it must be right. And some of us think if it's powerful, it must be true. But God says the real test isn't in the results themselves. It's actually in alignment. Does it line up with his word? Does it draw you closer to him or subtly pull you away? And then God says something even deeper. He allows these moments as a test, not because he doesn't know your heart, but because he wants to reveal it to you. I got to say that again because I got goosebumps as I was saying that. Not because he doesn't already know your heart, because he does. He knows everything about us before and after, but because he wants to reveal it to you. He wants to reveal our own heart to ourselves. How powerful is that? See, it's easy to say you love God when everything is clear, easy, all things are lining up and going well, but it's harder when something appealing is pulling you in the opposite direction of God. And that's where loyalty is revealed. Deuteronomy 13 goes even further in the chapter. It says, even if it's someone close to you, a friend, a spouse, a family member, if they try to pull you away from God, you cannot follow them. That sounds extreme until you understand the principle behind it. God will not share your heart. Jesus echoed this in the New Testament when he said, if you love anyone more than him, you are not worthy of him. That's not because God is insecure. It's because he knows that anything you put above him will eventually lead you away from life. So here's the real question. What has your loyalty right now? Because we all have these things that are competing for our loyalty. For some, it's relationships. For others, it may be success, comfort, reputation, or approval of others. But anything you won't surrender can slowly become something you follow. And what you follow ends up shaping who you will become. That's why this chapter ends by talking about entire cities turning away from God. Because sin doesn't just stay personal, it spreads, it influences, it reshapes culture. And if you're not careful, what once was convicting you will become something you tolerate. So, what do we do with this? We start by testing every single thing, not by how it feels, not by how successful it looks, but by whether it aligns with God's truth. We check the voices in our lives. Are they pulling us closer to obedience or giving us permission to drift? And we ask ourselves constantly a hard but necessary question. Is my loyalty to God absolute, or does it depend on what it costs me? Is my loyalty to God absolute, or does it depend on what it costs me? Because real faith isn't proven when it's easy. It's proven when God requires you to say no to something or someone you care about. Here's the encouragement though. God isn't trying to restrict you. He's trying to protect you because he knows that anything that pulls you away from him will eventually pull you away from the life you were created for. So today, let's take inventory. Let's look at what we're listening to or what's influencing us or what we're allowing to influence us. And also what's shaping our decisions. And let's make a decision ahead of time. No matter how good it sounds or how convincing it looks, if it leads me away from God, I am not following it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what works, it's about what's true. So, as we end this episode, if this encouraged or challenged you, let's like it, share it with somebody who you think may need it. And remember, God isn't after your belief, He's after your whole heart. So, this is the Word in Minutes podcast, and I'm your host, Devin Glasgow.